Christianity is in crisis. These are the words of Dr. Russell Moore. Russell Moore was the sort of culture warrior for the Southern Baptist Convention for many, many years, and he is the current editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. He has a book called Losing Our Religion, an altar call for evangelical America. And in the book, he says that Christianity is in crisis. Now, I don't often quote Dr. Russell Moore. When I left the Southern Baptist Convention 100 years ago, it was because I was beginning to understand God differently than many of my colleagues in the Southern Baptist Church. I was also beginning to understand our role as people of faith differently than many of my colleagues. But I agree with Dr. Moore on this, that Christianity is in crisis. Russell Moore sat down with NPR's All Things Considered in 2023, and the interviewer, Scott Detrow, asked him, why, Dr. Moore, why do you think Christianity is in crisis? Listen to what Dr. Russell Moore said. It was the result of having multiple pastors tell me essentially the same story about quoting the Sermon on the Mount, parenthetically, in their preaching, turn the other cheek, and to have someone come up after and say, where did you get those liberal talking points? And what was alarming to me is that in most of these scenarios, when the pastor would say, I'm literally quoting Jesus Christ, the response would be, oh, I apologize. The response would be, yes, but that doesn't work anymore. That's weak. And when we get to the point where the teachings of Jesus himself are seen as subversive to us, then we're in a crisis. Now, some of you know that I'm a part of a group called Pinnacle Leadership Associates. This is a group of clergy, and we do clergy coaching, we do church consulting, and some other things too. But the founder and team leader, my dear friend Mark Tidsworth, works with hundreds and hundreds of clergy. And he has said the same thing, that he's heard pastors say that church members have confronted their pastor because of literally quoting the Sermon on the Mount. So in the interview with NPR, the interviewer asked Dr. Moore, well, what do we do about this crisis that we're in? If Christianity is in crisis, what do we do about that? And Dr. Moore said something that I agree with. He said, I don't know the answer globally or even nationally, but I know that we've got to start small. We've got to start local. And it's hard to get more local than right here at Chapel by the Sea, the local church. So maybe we can start here. This Christianity in crisis may be more on my mind, since it's probably an occupational hazard. Since I'm a pastor, may not be as much on your mind, but it's on my mind quite a lot, and apparently in my subconscious as well, because listen to this crazy dream I had this week. Oh, here she goes with her crazy dreams. But it's fun. I think you'll enjoy this crazy dream. In the dream, we were gathered on Sunday morning, much like right now, but my position was in the pews with you, and someone was playing the piano and singing a solo at the same time. It wasn't you, Brent. I don't know where you were in my dream, but you were missing in action, let's just say that. But this person was playing the piano and singing a solo when the piano caught on fire. And of course, being the hero of my own dream, I jump into action, and all by myself, I find the fire extinguisher, and I put out the piano fire. You're welcome, by the way. And you want to know what you guys were doing while I was putting out the fire? You were absolutely ripping our pews apart. You were pulling the cushions off. You were taking the ends off. You were ripping them out of the ground. And when I turned around after being the hero and putting out the fire and I had seen what you had done, I was mortified, especially given the immense struggle these pews were during our recent remodel. There was more to the dream, but I'll leave it with that. That's pretty fun, right? You guys just kind of ripping up the place. I was so disappointed. Now, I'm no Jungian psychologist, but I think I know what this dream means. I'm not worried about you literally ripping up the pews. But in my line of work, we call parishioners sometimes the people in the pews. What do you think the pastor is subconsciously worried about? Division, right? Ripping up the body of Christ, the people in the pews. We are a purple church. You know what I mean by that, a purple church? Some of us vote red, some of us vote blue, some of us vote purple. Red and blue make purple. We are a purple church. And in this culture where it's increasingly hostile between the sides, we have this amazing opportunity and this responsibility to be able to show the world how it's done. That we can love one another despite our political differences, that we can come together and be one family, even though we may vote differently at the polls, and yet it's so tempting, chapel. It's so tempting to get sucked into the rhetoric and to the vitriol. It's tempting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. An author named Amanda Ripley has coined a term that I learned this week. She says among us there are, quote, conflict entrepreneurs. Those who foment discord, usually for their own gain. And a lot of times these folks have great influence on social media and in greater media. Conflict entrepreneurs. And our culture and our neighbors and our friends and our family members and maybe even us ourselves can get really sucked in by those who are good at being conflict entrepreneurs. So today, I'm going to suggest how we can inoculate ourselves from getting sucked in to all the nasty. Do you want to know how you can prevent yourself from getting sucked into all the nasty? I'm going to give you at least one way to inoculate yourself, that we can inoculate ourselves from this. And it's quite simple, at least the suggestion I have for today, and it's this. We need to get back to the basics. When Jesus' words are said to be weak by those who are calling themselves followers of Christ, then we have lost our way. And there's no better place to study the words of Jesus than in these 3 chapters in Matthew that we call the Sermon on the Mount. And so today we're beginning this 3-part series as we look at what Jesus said, the red letters, if you will. You remember those Bibles that had Jesus' words in red? These letters are all going to be read. And so let me pose this question. Why is it that you think that some pastors are catching heat literally for quoting the Sermon on the Mount? Think about that for 1 second. Here's what I think. I think the Sermon on the Mount is radical. I think it was radical then. I think it's just as radical now. Here are some examples of things Jesus said that are just as radical today as they were 2,000 years ago. In the next couple of weeks, we'll hear Jesus say, if somebody strikes you on the cheek, turn the other also. In a couple of weeks, we're going to hear Jesus say, pray for your enemies. And today in the reading, we heard Jesus say, blessed are the peacemakers. What's tricky is that we live in this world where we're inundated with so much media. I get you for about 20 minutes a week, if that, if you're not sleeping in on a Sunday. And media gets you the rest of the time. And so we've got to really emphasize these words of Jesus. And our charge as followers of Jesus is to be shaped by the Word and not so much by the world. And so these Beatitudes that we read together, we literally read together a moment ago, these Beatitudes are quite radical. And I would call them Jesus' countercultural manifesto, this new way of being in the world. And to that point, I'm going to invite Donna to come and read something that we've put together about what the world says compared with what Jesus says. Donna?
The world says, "Blessed are the self-made, the confident, those who pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Blessed are those who need no one and depend on no one."
And Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit."
The world says, "Blessed are the happy, the positive thinkers, those who move on quickly, don't dwell on problems, just think good thoughts and manifest success."
Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn."
The world says, "Blessed are the aggressive, the alpha personalities, those who take what they want. Nice guys finish last. The weak get trampled."
Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek."
The world says, "Blessed are those who hunger for success, wealth, and personal achievement. Look out for number one. Justice is for idealists."
Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness."
The world says, "Blessed are the tough, those who demand accountability. Show no weakness, make them pay, eye for an eye."
Jesus says, "Blessed are the merciful."
The world says, "Blessed are the shrewd, the politically savvy, those who know how to work the system. Everyone has an angle, find yours."
Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart."
The world says, "Blessed are the warriors, the strong, who maintain peace through strength. Conflict is inevitable. Make sure you win."
Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers."
The world says, "Blessed are the popular, those who fit in and don't rock the boat. Why suffer when you can compromise? Smart people avoid unnecessary trouble."
And Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness."
The world says, "Blessed are the liked, the influencers with good reputations. Your brand is everything. What will people think?"
And Jesus says, "Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account." Thank you, Donna. Give Donna a hand. That was great. Read like a retired English teacher. You see how upside down Jesus' kingdom is? It's completely opposite than the wisdom of the world. So our job as Christ followers is not to get in there and be cultural warriors. No. Our job is to be counter-cultural servants. Do you see the difference? Jesus goes on to call us the salt of the earth. Think about the importance of salt in the ancient world. We like it for its flavor, so did they. But they also used it more so than we do for what? Preserving food, from keeping food from decaying. But salt is only effective in that way if it's different than the object it's preserving, right? That's the only way it's working. And so we, as the salt of the earth, must be different than the world. We must have a different wisdom. We must have a counter-cultural way of being if we are truly to be Christ followers. Christ didn't stop there. He also called us the light of the world. Light doesn't defeat the darkness through conflict. Light defeats the darkness just by being light. And so the light that we must radiate is not the light of our favorite cable news show or our favorite political pundit or our favorite influencer. The light that we must radiate is the light of Christ. So what does that look like? It looks like blessing those whom we disagree with. It looks like turning the other cheek. It looks like praying for our enemies and loving them. That's not the way the world works, but it's how we work as followers of Christ. Those people who said that Jesus' words are weak. You want to know what's weak in my mind? Responding to hatred with just more hatred. You want to know what's weak? Following the crowd into the latest outrage cycle, whatever it may be. You know what's weak? Allowing the conflict entrepreneurs to manipulate our emotions for their profit. That's weak, not Jesus' words. If you show me somebody who says Jesus' words are weak, I'm going to show you somebody who has been formed by the world and not so much by the word. You want to know what takes strength? Here's what takes strength. Responding to hatred with love. That takes strength. You want to know what takes strength? Standing up to the crowd when they're wrong. That takes some strength. You want to know what takes strength? Refusing to be manipulated by those who profit from our division. That takes some real strength. We're a purple church. This opportunity we have, this responsibility we have to model how we can be salt and light in the world around us. And this is going to require us as individuals and as a church to be a little bit radical, to resist the pull of culture, to turn off the conflict entrepreneurs, to choose what Jesus calls later in the Sermon on the Mount, the narrow way. I'm going to read that to you. It's from Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Jesus said this, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow, and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it." It takes some real strength to take the narrow way, and that's the way of Christ. Christianity is in crisis because too many of us have chosen the wide gate. We found it easier to hate our enemies than to love them. We found it more satisfying to curse those who curse us than to bless them. And we found it more natural to be shaped by the world than by the world. Christianity is in crisis because we've let it become in crisis. It doesn't have to be that way, though, Chapel. The radical call of Christ calls us to be different in this world that's mad with divisions. And so Jesus' teachings from the Sermon on the Mount, they're not weak. They're radical, they're revolutionary, and they're so very real. They aren't liberal talking points. They're not conservative propaganda. They're the countercultural manifesto of God's kingdom breaking into this very world. And so here's my challenge for you this week, if you're willing to accept it. Pick one of those Beatitudes, the one that you find hardest to follow. Pick one and really set your intention to live into that way of being salt and light this week. The question isn't whether Jesus' way works anymore. The question is whether or not we'll be radical enough to try it.